So we're in the sixth parak of Temidin and UMusafin, and we read about how there was salt available on the altar. The salt was there, of course, to salt the sacrifices, and they would also use it to, the same way we put salt on the streets when it snows and to prevent icing, they would salt the kevesh, that is the ramp, the walkway of the ramp, so the Kohanim wouldn't slip if there was a reason to believe that it would get slippery from the rain and the cold. Okay. In the fourth halacha, it gets kind of interesting here. There's a little bit of machlokes. Rambam writes, "Wachar, hold on a second. Wachar shemalin evarim lakevesh mitkansi kulon lishkat gazith." After they bring the limbs up of the offerings up the ramp of the temple of the altar, mitkansim kulam lishkat gazith. V'hamimune omer lahem. They would gather in the chamber of hewn stone, which is also the headquarters of the Sanhedrin. Here it's the Kohanim who are doing this. And the appointed one, the one who's in charge of everybody, says, Baruchu beracha ahaf. Recite one blessing. And they would say the bracha that you and I know as Avath Olam. And as we said last week, that seems to be the old Girsa. In Nusach, traditional Nusach Ashkenaz, Avath Olam is at night, Avar Rabbah is by day. But most Easterners and Nusach Yisrael and the Gra have it as Avath Olam even in the morning. So they say that the pre-Shema bracha, and then the Ten Commandments, V'aseret HaDibroth, U'Shema, V'ayayim Shema, V'ayomer, the three chapters we know as Kriyas Shema, and the bracha of Ritzei and Sim Shalom. That's how the Rambam has it. So you should be asking, wait a minute, what about Yotzer Or? One bracha before Kriyas Shema in the morning, we have two brachas, Yotzer Or and Avath Olam. So what's going on over here? Which one is it? You should know Reish Lakish in the source text in Brachos 11a actually believe that yes, the one bracha is Yotzer Or, not Avath Olam. Why only one bracha? I don't know why. I haven't seen necessarily. Perhaps someone has an answer for this. Why is it they leave out the one of the brachas and only say the other one? It's a good question. Over here it says Sim Shalom. Ritzei and Sim Shalom we know from our Shmon Esrei. They leave out the Modim part also, and leave out the rest of the Shmon Esrei. Just these two brachas from Shmon Esrei. So Tosfos say that the reference here, Sim Shalom, is actually no. It's the Kohanim recite Birkat Kohanim. So why what would be the basis for that? Okay? They would say the verses of Birkat Kohanim. Why? Because in the source text, again, they're in brachos, but this time I think now it's on the next page. Could be the next daf. It says actually calls the bracha that you and I know as Sim Shalom Birkat Kohanim. That's the terminology. So for many, the bracha called Birkat Kohanim in Shmon Esrei is the bracha you and I know as Sim Shalom because it is said in conjunction with the Kohanim actually saying their blessings. But here, Tosfos understands Birkat Kohanim literally, although it's kind of difficult because they would basically be saying it twice. Here they're sitting in Lishkat HaGazith and just reciting the verses, and we have yet to get to the part of the service when they're actually going to stand on the Duchan and bless the people. That's towards the end over here. Okay. And then it says they had another bracha. V'shabbat musifin bracha achat v'hi sheyomeru anshe mishmar hayotzei l'anshei mishmar hanichnas. This blessing, or this prayer, is for the outgoing group of Kohanim to pray for the incoming group. Misha shikena shemo b'bayit hazeh, he who has domiciled his name in this house. Yishaken b'nechem ava ahava shalom uriuth, should domicile between you, amongst you, love, brotherhood, or fraternity, peace, and friendship. Then they have the third lot and the fourth lot. That's the side which Kohanim are going to do the next parts of the service. The one who won the privilege of bringing the incense, so he gets to do so. He enters the sanctuary and he burns the incense on the golden altar. The one who won the privilege of cleaning out the menorah and to light the first two candles, at least according to the Rambam's opinion, he gets to do that. The one who burned the incense leaves with the one who cleaned out the menorah. And he stands on the steps of the sanctuary edifice. him and his fellow Kohanim, or why I say his brothers, because technically speaking, they're all closely related. The Kohanim on duty on any given day are all the closely related Kohanim. The Mishmar itself, the watch, is composed of one ancestral group, and the individual days are composed of subgroups of families. So, yeah, it could be already after many generations, there are many cousins once removed, or many times removed, 20th cousins, but they're still more closely related than the other Kohanim. Kishiagiu ben ha'olam u'lamizbeach, natal echad ha'magrifa, uzrakah ben ha'olam u'lamizbeach. When they reach the area between the sanctuary and the altar, one of them takes the magrifa, that big, basically shovel, okay, to get into the coals. It's a large metal object, so it's going to make a noise. Wahayla kol gadol, made a loud noise. Ushlosha devarim hayitha mishamesheth, and this serves three purposes. Kohen shehu shomeath kolah, yodea she'achal kohanim nechnasim lishtahavoth, v'hu rasuva. His fellow kohanim hear it, and they know that it's time to put a move on and go prostrate themselves inside the sanctuary. There's a point in the service where they get to actually fall down on their face. Why would they want to do so? Because prostration before God is a holy service. The ancestors did it, Moses did it, King David did it, Solomon did it, and thank God, Jews have once again begun to do this in the temple even today. They're still not allowed to offer sacrifice, and they can't fix a place, and they can barely wear tefillin. But at least this mitzvah has made a comeback. God willing, the rest of the mitzvahs shall make a comeback soon. Uven Levi shehu shomeath kolah, yodea she'achal ha'leviim nechnasim ledaber bashir v'hu rasuva. The Levite who hears the noise knows now that his fellow Leviim are getting ready ledaber bashir. They're going to talk in singing. This is an expression from Chazal. It means they're about to get ready to sing their song. So he puts a move on also and shows up to where he takes his place. Rosh Ma'amad kishaya shomeath kolah hayam ma'amidat hatmeim al shar mizrach mipnei hashad. The head of the watch, in this case, it's that particular group who are there that day, the Ma'amad. Who are the Ma'amad? Those are Israelites. These aren't the Kohanic group that's there. This is the Israelite group that's supposed to be there. We discussed them previously. Chazal said it's not right that a man's sacrifice is also offered, but he's not there, or his representative is not there. So because we have the Temidin, the daily sacrifices are offered on behalf of Am Yisrael needs a representative or representatives present. So they have this group of men who are there fasting and praying, reading the Torah, representing all of Am Yisrael during the sacrificial service. So they're there, and he takes all the Tmeim and he puts them up, makes them stand at the eastern gate. Doesn't let them in. There are a lot of people who are ritually contaminated, and the only way they can become completely uncontaminated after doing the usual rituals of being sprinkled with the ashes or whatever it may be. In this case, it's all the people who immersed and counted 7 days because they're Mitzoraim, Zavim, Zavot, people like that, Yoladot, Gerim, everybody who is Mechusar Kapara, the lepers. All these people, in order to purify themselves, needed to undergo a long process, aside from immersion. And the end of their process is the bringing of the ritual sacrifices. So they're standing outside of the Azarah because, technically speaking, before they offer their sacrifice, they cannot be allowed into the Azarah. Wait a minute. Aren't they ritually impure? Yes. There are different levels of ritual impurity, which we discussed last week, in previous weeks. Most people have certain forms of ritual impurity could actually be on the Temple Mount, and they could go up to certain points, as long as they don't enter the actual inner courtyard of the temple. Okay, so they line them up there. Afterwards, the one who won the privilege of bringing the limbs of the sacrifice from the ramp of the altar to the top of the altar where they're to be burned, gets to do that. What do they do? Those Kohanim who are standing, as this is going on, those who are standing on the steps leading up to the sanctuary, so they start reciting the priestly blessing. They start to bless the people. They say one blessing using the divine name. Where did the Rambam explain this? In the laws of prayer. Why one blessing? We normally, the Birkat Kohanim, if you look at it in the text there in the book of Numbers, Parshas Naso, what does it say? it says that there's actually three verses, three blessings to be said. Okay? Three blessings. And for example, when we hear the Quran say it, we say Amen. But in the temple, they're only supposed to respond Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael Mino Olam Ve'ad Olam, or Baruch Hashem Elokim Elokei Yisrael Mino Olam Ve'ad Olam. Machlokas there. And in this case, the sages said no, they're supposed to only say it as one long blessing with no Amen. Okay, so that's what they do in the temple, and also they utter the divine name. They actually say the name as it was pronounced. That's not exactly the precedent. The sages say that after Shimon HaTzadik passed away, the priests in the temple, this is mid-Second Temple times, they stopped doing so. Instead, they started saying just the same adnut all the time. It's true that if up until that point, when people saw the divine name, Minastam, in the Bible, they read it as it was written. We know the consonants, the vowelization, exact vowelization is, if not a well-guarded secret, perhaps even a lost secret. And most of the time, the Shem Adnut is as it is spelled. But in this case, we have a tradition that just read Shem Adnut instead of the divine name when it occurs. So that's what they start doing in the temple. Interestingly enough, I haven't seen anybody discuss this. The Rambam adds in his Parsha Mishnayos, he doesn't say this explicitly in the Moreh Nevuchim, which was written well afterwards, or in the Yad HaChazaka. He says that concerning this divine name, it may only be pronounced in the temple. So when was it pronounced in the temple? When the Kohanim were reciting the blessing, and when the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would recite his confession on Yom Kippur. That's the only times when they would say it. Fine enough. The Rambam adds in the Parsha Mishnayos that even discussing the divine name, speaking about the divine name, perhaps about its significance, and like he says, it's only taught to proper students once every 7 years, which is an expression meaning rarely. Okay? Only is it, the tradition of how it is to be pronounced is passed down. Apparently, these discussions may only be held in the temple. That's what the Rambam says. He seems to say it la'alocha of the Parsha Mishnah. So the Rambam fully believed that in his later life. He didn't bring this halacha, like I said, later. I haven't found it anywhere else. I haven't found the source necessarily for this idea. You could even read what he writes in Hilchot Tefillah, saying that you're only supposed to pronounce God's name in the temple, and because pronouncing the name may only be done in the temple, you can only teach about the divine name in the temple. I don't know. So I'm looking for more information about that. Either way, it would basically mean, if this understanding is correct, if Jews have not been hanging out inside the temple, then no one's been passing on this particular tradition. And it is questionable if even Rambam himself had such a tradition, how the divine name should be pronounced. He was never there sitting down with anybody who could teach him. And it seems that, at least the way he describes in Moreh Nevuchim, that he himself may not have known how to pronounce it. Okay? Nowadays, there could be. I don't know. I've never met someone who's walked over and says, hey, here's how you pronounce the divine name. There were linguists, Gentile linguists, who proposed what they believe it should be. They haven't explained themselves. It certainly is not our tradition that way. So there should be, their guess is as good as anybody else's. The traditional way of vowelizing, as though the Yud had a Shavah, and the He had a Cholam, and the Vav had a Kamatz, is certainly wrong. Those dots there just indicate how the name is to be pronounced with Shem Adnut. It's telling you, it's like a Kriyan Ktiv. Here's the four letters of the divine name, but read it as Aleph Daled Nun Daled with this Nikud. Read the Aleph with a Shavah, and Aleph doesn't get a Shavah. In this case, it gets a Chataf Patach. And the Daled should have a Cholam, and the Nun should have a Kamatz. Though Noi. That's all the vowelization indicates. And later you had Ignoramai, who would read this name as though it was spelled Yod Hey Vav Hey, and it was pronounced this way. And then they, for some reason, because that's how you anglicize it, they start pronouncing the Y sound like a J. Yehuda becomes Judah, Yosef becomes Joseph. That's incorrect. It's just an anglicization. And they pronounced the Vav as though it was actually a V. So they changed two of the consonants, and they added vowels where there shouldn't be. And perhaps that silent, they make the hey silent at the end, even though the Rambam says perhaps it's a mapike at the end. We don't know. Or maybe the middle hey has a dagesh of some sort. The Rambam puts it up in the air. Either way, you see that whatever whatever they're doing, it's certainly not the name. I think that being that the case, there's no reason to say that's the word Jehovah. It has nothing to do with God's name. Okay, it is so not His name. It might as well be any other gibberish. Okay, so there we have it. Oh, we got just a message. I asked the rabbi this particular question. He knew about it. He has a source about it, and he hasn't given me an answer yet. Okay, let's see the next one. Achar kach malin solef hanisachim. After they had burned the pieces of the korban tamid, the lamb, they're going to bring up the solef of the nisachim. The solef is the mincha. Every lamb has to come with a certain amount of meal offering, so that's what's brought. It's not baked into bread at this time, and maktira chavitin. And they also vachar solet maktira chavitin. That's the Kohen Gadol's personal meal offering every single day. He himself does not have to prepare it or offer it. However, he has to pay for it. V'achar chavitin ma'alin et hayayin l'nisuch. And after the Kohen Gadol's personal meal offering, half in the morning, half in the afternoon, they bring the wine for the libation. It's at the point of pouring the libation that the Levim sing their song, the song of the day. And the singers, in this case, it's not singers, it means the persons who are making the music, because Levim are the singers. Here it says Mishorim are the ones who are playing the instruments, and instruments are played by Israelites. Okay, it always says they hit it as though everything is a percussion instrument. Well, in the temple they had what kinds? They had percussion, and they had string, and they had woodwind, and they also had brass, or it was mostly made out of other metals like silver and gold. They didn't use brass necessarily for these things, but I guess they could have used bronze, but I don't think they were making instruments out of bronze back then. Nowadays you make proper ones out of brass, and it sounds better. So they're doing all this. What it says makin, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything was a percussion instrument. Even someone who's playing a string instrument or someone who had a wind instrument, it's still called makin in this case. And they would sound 3 tekiyas, 3 sounds of the shofar. Technically speaking, he's going to say this is used in the general sense. Not every tekiah here is an actual straight sound. There's also some truas in there, along with the sections of the song. The song is basically divided up into a few sections. Some songs are longer than others, but they're basically divided into 3. When they gave the wine to the Kohen, who has the privilege of pouring the libation, what would they do? There were 2 Kohanim who were standing on the table of the fats. What's the table of the fats? When they remove what's to you and me forbidden fat. If we would shecht an animal here, we couldn't eat the forbidden fat, because those are the parts of the animal that, if it were sacrificed, were burned on the altar. So they put these fat sections of meat, the animal, on these tables before bringing them onto the mizbeach. Now they're serving basically as a stage for these kohanim who have the 2 trumpets. And the number 2 kohen, the number 2 to the Kohen Gadol, he is standing at the corner of the altar. Makbili says the southeast corner, and he has flags in his hand. Sudar, and sometimes means just like a piece of cloth that is waved. So in this case, it means a flag. Why? Because in the olden days, as we pointed out when we got to Sefer Bamidbar, apparently when it says Degel Machanei this, a Degel Machanei that, the flag of this camp, this camp formation of 3 Israelite tribes, back then Degel did not mean flag, it meant army formation. And the closest word they had for a flag, let's say, in the Bible is a nace. Okay? A nace is like a banner, saying a sign that you put up on top of a pole. Okay? Nace lehit noseis. But sometimes the nace just referred to the flagpole and not the thing on top of the flag. Okay? So it depends. They used to have, and by the way, flags used to look different back then, but they said eventually in the Midrash that there were tribal flags, as we call them, but that's a later, apparently a retcon to the thing. Degel didn't mean a flag back then. So these are flags. Why? He's going to use them as a signal to the Kohanim when to begin their job. Takeu with Riu with Takeu. The Kohanim sounded what we call a tekiah, straight blast, and the alarm, the trua, and the tekiah. And then they came and stood next to this person who's in charge of the tziltzal, that's a percussion against the cymbals. Tziltzal, you see that you have the tzadi lamid twice. Tziltzal, it's also known as mitziltayim. Okay? Same idea there. Echad mimino, echad mismalo. One to his right, one to his left. In the Korean edition, there is an error here. It says taka'u with hariyu with taka'u. Hariyo is an imperative form. The past tense, like taka'u, that's a simple pa'al verb. The hariya is a hif'il. So it should be, in past tense, heiriyu, with the hey tsuruya, a tzere under the hey, as per Makbili. I think you got it right. If it's a kamatz, they turn into an imperative verb. So here it should be taka'u with heiriyu with taka'u. I don't know what Machon Mamre has. And I would check it, but sort of without the computer, and if I were to open up Machon Mamre right now, I wouldn't be seeing this recording. So there we have it. There's a sheet over here. It says, Yeshomrim she'atkiyot shetaku al shulchan hakavim hem chelik b'tisha atkiyot shel al tamid. Some say that these tekiyas with the trumpets that these Kohanim are doing are part of the set of 9 we just described. And others say she'atkiyot elu ayu lo'arer tzumat halev la'abit la'anafat hasurim v'nam chelik me'atkiyot tamid. And others say no, these are just the preparatory sound. Get ready, we're going to wave the flags, and then they're going to begin, but they're not of the 9 that are required to be part of the song of the Levites. And then the Kohen who's holding the bottle of wine bends over to get ready to pour the wine. And then the number 2 Kohen, he starts waving the flags. This one is knocking the cymbals. And who else is having? With Takeu, Elu Bachatzor Saroth. And then they start sounding the trumpets with the Hebrew Aluyim Bashir. And then the Levim start talking in song. Once again, not literally means they start singing their song. Higula Perek, and they got to the stop point. Remember, they're dividing the Tilim into 3. So they get to the pause point. Takeu, Vishtahavu Kol Am Shebazara. They would sound the shofar again, and all the people who were in the courtyard of the temple would bow down. Now you notice, before we said the Birkat Kohanim and the Kohanim bless the people, generally speaking, there are quite a lot of Israelites just inside the courtyard of the temple. The halacha is, if they had business being there, they came to pray and they were sufficiently ritually pure, then they were allowed in, and no one could stop them. Perhaps maybe the Kohanim had regulations, don't get in our way, but the regular Israelites were among the crowds there and the Kohanim, and they're the ones who are bowing down to God, and they're the ones who are receiving the divine blessing. It says in Yoma, the Kohen Gadol would show up. Perhaps this wasn't just on Yom Kippur, this was on all the holidays, and the place was packed already. Too full of many Jews who wanted front row standing only, standing room only, seats. You could standing seats to see the service in the temple. And that, like I said, in today's terms, that would be a Jewish right. And certainly to be on the Temple Mount is also a Jewish right. No Jew would be chased off the Temple Mount as long as he was ritually pure. And he could stay there all night praying or studying Torah, whatever it may be, as long as he's outside the perimeter that was under guard by the Levites and the Kohanim that night. And certainly during the day also, there was no limit to how much Jews could go on there, which should be the case nowadays. But what are you going to do? The Levim aren't in charge. With every section of the psalm, there's going to be the sounding of the shofar, and with every sounding of the shofar, the people would bow down. So they're bowing down 3 times. Total number of times when they sound the shofar with this tamid is 9. How exactly this is broken up is a machlokas. So God willing, we'll see what the Sanhedrin rules when this has to be put back into practice. The Rambam continues in the 8th halacha, at least in the printed version. Ein omrim shira ela alolath sibur v'zevchei shalmehem k'amarim b'Torah. The Kohanim only sing a song. The Levim only sing a song upon communal burnt offerings and their zivchei shalmehem, which would be the ones offered on Shavuos. Right? The only time there's a communal peace offering that's on Shavuos. However, those voluntary burnt offerings that they bring from the funds that are donated to the Lishka, which they call elsewhere the Ketz HaMizbeach, the fund to make sure that there's something always being offered on the temple altar. If you could say it's a slow day, so that they're gonna, they have to buy their time, so they'll just bring another lamb. Okay, that's called Ketz Mizbeach. That's not a requirement necessarily. He calls it a type of nedava. Afal pishein shel tzibur. Even though the community is paying for this sacrifice, ein omrin alehen shira. Upon that, the Levim don't have a song. They don't sing anything. Or if there's just a libation that's being brought on its own, not with an animal. Why? Because perhaps there are libations that were meant to be offered with an animal that had previously been offered some days ago, and now they're only finally getting around to offering its libation. Even though batil vars mano batil korbano, if a korban was sacrificed properly, there is a debt. Its libation has to be offered eventually. Or you could just have someone who voluntarily offered a libation here. Even though the Levim do sing when the communal libations are offered, they do not sing when these other libations are offered. There is none of them. Let's see here. Hold on. They say that the Chafetz Chaim said that it actually would be forbidden to sing a song, for Levim to sing one of the Tehillim when these sacrifices are offered, because then people think that these are somehow obligatory sacrifices. Okay, interesting. Hashir Shal Levim Omrim B'Yom HaRishon. Here's a song they used to sing on the first day. People are familiar with this Mishneh from Maseches Tamid, which people say every Shabbos. They mention the Shir Shal Yom. Hashem Ha'ares Umloa. That's the 24th Psalm. The next day, the double 2 times 24 is 48. So on the second day, they say Psalm 48. Gadol Hashem Ulam Me'od. The Rambam that's not actually the first verse of the Tehillim. That's the main verse that people would know about, so they'd say that. And on the third day, Psalm 92, Elokim Yisav Ba'dath El. On the fourth day, Kel Nekamoth Hashem. They did not say the next 3 verses of L'chud Naranana, because it ends with God shall thoroughly destroy them. Yatzmitem Hashem Elokim. Okay, even though it's talking about God taking vengeance upon the evildoers, when we say Shir Shal Yom, we then add the next 3 verses of the subsequent psalm, and they didn't do that in the temple. That's Psalm 94. Mahamishi Harninu Lelohim Uzenu. Also, the Rambam's leaving out the introductory verse of that psalm. That's Psalm 91. And you notice Psalm 91 is right next to Psalm 92. That is, Thursday and Tuesday's psalms are right next to each other in the book of Tehillim. The Thursday psalm right before the Tuesday psalm. On day 6, that would be Friday, Adonai Malach Keuth Lavesh. That's the one they would sing. We're familiar with that also. That's actually the first verse of the psalm. That's Psalm 93. The Shabbat, Mizmor Asher Liyom HaShabbat. And on the Sabbath, they'd sing Psalm 92, which is the psalm for the Sabbath day. It's kind of obvious based on its introduction. This is actually the psalm for the Sabbath day. It's the only one of the days of the week. None of the other days of the week it says, this is a psalm for day 1. This is a psalm for the second day. They don't have that. So the Sabbath psalm is right before Hashem Malach. Psalm 92 is right before Psalm 93. And it turns out then that day 6, day 7, and day 4, Wednesday, are consecutive psalms in the Tehillim. So the Shirei Shal Yom happen to be clumped together in this area of Tehillim. There's 2 that are joined together, and then there's another 3 that are joined together. Is that significant? I don't know. Why were they all like that? I don't know. But as we said before, basically, Psalms as we know it, the Psalms was put together by the same person who came up with the whole idea of having this set temple, and is the one who created the current concept of watches, different Kohanic groups and Levitic groups who are in charge of doing this. So yeah, this is part of King David's lasting temple legacy, something that lasted for a very long time. On Shabbos, there's more sacrifices, right? The Musfei Shabbat Urim Shirat Azinu. On Shabbos, you have the Tamid and you have a Musaf. They basically look the same, just another lamb to be offered. Well, 2 more lambs in the middle of the day. There's a Tamid in the morning, there's a Tamid in the afternoon, and 2 midday lambs. So when we say the Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat, this is the psalm for the Sabbath day, it's talking about the Tamid of the Sabbath. But the Musaf gets its own song. B'Musfei Shabbat Urim Shirat Ha'azinu. On Shabbos, the Musaf song is known as Ha'azinu. It is not from the Tehillim. And it makes sense. Why? Because when they first started the sacrificial service in the times of Moses, many of the Tehillim had yet to be composed. It's true that we have a tradition, and it makes sense that many of the Tehillim King David inherited and those who preceded him. And Chazal even say that they attribute the book itself attributes at least one psalm to Moses. Chazal say there's a whole group of them there. There's a contradiction. It says that Moses therefore was the one who wrote the psalm for the Sabbath day. Others say it was Adam himself, the first man, created that psalm. Either way, according to either of these approaches, they had this song in the time of Moses. So that's something they could have sang on Sabbath, but what they sing the other days. I don't know. A few of these Shirei Shel Yom actually are attributed to people who were David or David's contemporaries. So I don't know. What did they do in the times of Shiloh? It's a good question. What did they sing? I don't know. We don't have a tradition about that. I don't know if anybody has a way to reconstruct what was. Except Ha'azinu, they're not singing the entire song each Shabbos. They actually divided the song into 6. Haziv Lach is the expression there. Each one is a rosh teva, okay? An acronym, Haziv Lach. And the first one obviously is Ha'azinu. That's the first verse. The second one is a Zion, Zechor Yemoth Olam, and then the rest are subject to Machlokes. It's kind of funny. This is a tradition. The only way you're allowed to read Ha'azinu and break it up into aliyahs in the synagogue when it comes time to read Ha'azinu, either once every 3 years or once a year, has to be done the way it was done in the temple. But, for example, Steinsaltz has a handy-dandy chart there in, I think it's Maseches Rosh Hashanah, where it says there's basically, I don't know, must be a multitude of opinions what exactly these verses are, because there are a few verses that begin with Yod, Vav, Lamed, and Kaf. And there's many different ways to recombine them. So this is funny. This is supposed to be a positive tradition, and there is no. And while there are Rishonim who did record a tradition, there's so many contradictions here. Like the Rambam's own principle, no one knows the right way to do it. The same way we read it in the synagogue. We divide up the song into 6. That's what they do in the temple. They would say a section every Shabbos. And Gamura Shira B'Shisha Shabbathot. So it took six Sabbaths. The Rambam considers here Sabbath to be a masculine noun. That's why it says Shisha, not Sheish. And it's like a lot of other Hebrew words. Are they masculine or feminine? Okay. Most people generally consider Shabbos to be feminine because it ends in a tuf. And the plural is Shabbatot. However, the argument against it is that tuf, in the word Shabbath, for example, is part of the shoresh. It's an actual tough part of the shoresh. When you have a word like he rasitha, she wanted, that tough is actually thought of as a silent yud or a silent hey. Why? Because if you say a person wanted, a masculine person did, hu ratzah. There's no hu ratzaf. Okay? Actually, if you say ratzaf, that's a shortened form of ratzitha, which is the feminine form. But in a word like shavitha, also the same weak tough sound there, but it looks like the tough is not part of the shoresh. No, in the masculine form, it would be not hu shava, it would be shavath. Shavath would be nafash. So you see the tough is part of the shoresh. So because this tough is actually there and it doesn't switch out for kamat's silent hey, it's not a feminine tough. Okay, 2 different approaches to this. So it says it takes 6 weeks, 6 Sabbaths for the Levium to get to this point where they've finished the song of Ha'azinu. And then they start again. On the 7th Sabbath, they're singing the song as they did 6 weeks before that. And the 7th, Mincha of Shabbos, they don't go back to saying Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat. Usually, the way they understand this is that, let's say Tuesday had 2 lambs, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So in the morning, they sing the song for Tuesday, and in the afternoon, when they offer the afternoon lamb, they sing the song for Tuesday. So you would have thought that on Shabbos morning with the Tamid, there's the song for the Sabbath day. So too in the afternoon with the Tamid, there's a song for the Sabbath day. But Kamash Bala, no. The afternoon of the Sabbath day, they would sing the song at the sea, but only half of it. They'd sing the first half, one Shabbos, Az Yashir until the Micha Mocha Pasuk. And the second week, they'd sing the Micha Mocha part until the end. Okay? So every other week, they would finish the song at the sea. Very interesting. Most people aren't familiar with this. We're going to talk about the Vilna Gaon when we finish this parak, because we have to make note of that. UMusaf Shel Rosh Hashanah Hayom Amrim Harninu Le'Elohim Uzenu. The Rambam adds that we have a tradition. We know what the song for Rosh Hashanah was. It's the same song as Thursday. Wait a minute. So what if Rosh Hashanah is on Thursday? According to our calendar, Rosh Hashanah falls out on Thursday. about 29% of the time. So what did they do? Okay. So he says there's a little bit different. If it was actually Thursday, so now what happened? With the Tamid, they sang the Thursday song, and now they're going to sing the same song on Rosh Hashanah. It seems like the same text. So you start for the Pasuk Hasirosi, Mesevel Shechmo, Hasirothi, Mesevel Shechmo, which is starting from like the 7th verse. Also, I'd like to point out that even when it was Rosh Hashanah regular, it must be they had a different tune. The same song, but with a different tune. Right? It's possible, and that would explain how they could do this, because there are other songs on other holidays also that seem to match up with days of the week. So how do you know which one they were singing? Is it the Thursday song? Is it Rosh Hashanah song? The answer, the tune. Kol Hashem Yachil Midbar, which is Mizmor LeDavid. Okay, Psalm 29. That was instead of the Tamid, instead of the whatever day of the week it is, if it's a Tuesday, that's what they would sing. That's a tradition that we have from the sages. Rosh Chodesh Shechal Yof B'Shabbat. Let's say it's Rosh Chodesh and it's Shabbos. They knew it was Rosh Chodesh, by the way, because the Sanhedrin made the decision to make it Rosh Chodesh. Shirah Shel Rosh Chodesh Doche et Shirah Shel Shabbat. The Rosh Chodesh song takes precedent over the Shabbos song. Why can't you just sing both? This is an important yesod I learned from Rabbi Ari Khan. I think he just sent me something else that maybe we should add to this, but let's first see what he pointed out. There's only one song each day. If there's a musaf, and there's many musafim, so you have a song with the Tamid in the morning and afternoon, but you have a Shabbos, when Shabbos comes around and you have the musaf, basically the limbs of all the various burnt offerings for the musaf, Shabbos plus Rosh Chodesh, are being offered together. And then when it comes to offer the libation for musaf, the Shabbos wine and the musaf wine are being poured by the Kohanim simultaneously. So the Levim can only sing one song. Okay? The Levim only have one song. So which one takes precedence? The answer, even though Shabbos is more frequent and holier than Rosh Chodesh, for many reasons, which is normally the rule, because they want people to know it's Rosh Chodesh. The fact that today's Shabbos, everybody knows that, it's automatic. Every 7 days, Shabbos, no matter what. Rosh Chodesh is something that they have to announce, and the announcement is coming from the temple. So in order to publicize this, Dochet Shir Shirah Shel Shabbat, Kedei Lefarsamo, Hayom Rosh Chodesh. We have to get the word out that's Rosh Chodesh. The Rosh Chodesh song takes precedence. And we have over here a note. This is as opposed to other Yom Tovim. Well, what would be the case? That Shabbos overrides Yom Tov. So the first day of Passover, for example, is Shabbos. So you have a Musaf of Passover, and you have a Musaf for Shabbos. Which song do they sing? The Shabbos song. Kal v'chomer also on Chol Moed. Why? Because Shabbos takes precedence. People know that it's Passover already, and they have to tell people it's Shabbos. Shabbos is more frequent and it's holier than any day of Yom Tov. So we have the Shabbos song. So apparently, and the Vilna Gaon has a minhag, an interesting minhag. He said even in the synagogue, instead of a shir shel yom on special occasions, you should have a song that is reminiscent of the occasion or the song they actually sang in the temple. So the Vilna Gaon says, Rosh Chodesh rolls around, don't say the shir shel yom of the day, even if it's Shabbos. Say the Rosh Chodesh song, whatever it may be. And he's basically even saying that the Rosh Chodesh song takes precedent over the weekday song, which didn't happen in the temple. If it was Rosh Chodesh on a Tuesday, they sang the Tuesday song and they sang the Rosh Chodesh song. But the Vilna Gaon is saying one song per day, no matter what, Musaf or Shir Shel Yom, it doesn't really matter. One song for your Musaf. So if it's, let's say, Shabbos, it's Rosh Hashanah, and it's Shabbos, you have 4 songs, potentially. You have the Shabbos morning song, and you have the Ha'azinu song, you have the Rosh Chodesh song, and the Rosh Hashanah song. So the Vilna Gaon saying, in the morning with the Talmud, you have the Shabbos song, that stays clear. And the 3 potential songs for Musaf, Rosh Hashanah takes precedence, because you have to announce to people, not is it Rosh Chodesh, it's Rosh Hashanah. Fine. That's good. But the Vilna Gaon says it even beats the Shabbos song in the synagogue. Why? Because the Vilna Gaon wants you to be singing less Tehillim. The Vilna Gaon did not believe in adding Tehillim to the services, even though today people have no problem with that. When Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah roll around, so their Sidurim have, each one of these songs is given its due. The Vilna Gaon held saying Tehillim isn't what people think it's cracked up to be, and it should not be added to the prayers. So one is enough, the one that has the highest educational value. Okay, we'll see the next halacha, and then we'll start asking the kasha on what the Vilna Gaon is saying to do. Shabbat, maktirin et shnei bazichei levona, UMusafin, kodem nisuch yain shel musafim. He mentioned this before. On Shabbos, we burn the 2 bowls of frankincense along with the musafs before they start pouring the wine and libations. The chaseder shosim kol yom haboker, according to the order that they would do every single morning. Kach osim ben harbaim. That's what they do in the afternoon. Chutz me haramat hadeshen mimizbeach hachitzon, except for clearing off the ashes from the outer altar. That's something that was basically the pregame before the morning service began. The sidur ha'marachot v'ha'payisot, or setting up the wood on the altar to burn that day's sacrifices, and the lots to decide which kohanim would do everything. They did that all in the morning. Those things are limited to what they do in the morning. Okay, so here's the question on what the Vilna Gaon had. A lot of Rishonim, a lot of Achronim, as mentioned in the footnotes of the Minchas Chinuch, for example, say the Vilna Gaon basically had a song for every special occasion, a Shir Shel Yom for every special occasion. First problem is, a lot of those do not have a Talmudic precedent. So the Rambam is going to say, well, I found in, let's say, in the Talmud, it says what the songs are for every day of Sukkot. But what about for all the days of Pesach? What about for Hanukkah and Purim? Hanukkah and Purim had no special sacrifice in the temple. They're not biblical holidays or rabbinic institutions. Yet the Vilna Gaon says, like people saw today, tonight is the first night of Hanukkah. Today, they saw in their Sidurim, Nusach Eretz Yisrael, not Eretz Yisrael, not Old Eretz Yisrael, New Prushim, Vilna Gaon Eretz Yisrael. It says in the Luach that we didn't say the Thursday song, we said Mizmor Shir Hanukatha Bayith L'Dawith, and that is going to take precedence over the weekday song every day of Hanukkah that is not Rosh Chodesh or Shabbos. In which case, if it's Rosh Chodesh wins. And if it's Shabbos and not Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos will win. Fine. So what's going on here? Where did the Vilna Gaon get these songs? And a lot of the other songs, they don't have much of a precedent. We know that there's a Rosh Chodesh song, for example, but there is no Talmudic source indicating that it's what we know as Bar-Chi Nafshi, even though the Vilna Gaon says Bar-Chi Nafshi is the Rosh Chodesh song that we say in the synagogue. Okay, so that beat Shir Shel Yom today. But does that have anything connection? Was that the song that they would sing on Rosh Chodesh in the temple? Can make an argument otherwise. So what's going on here? So it's very clear that the Vilna Gaon's song of these, the Vilna Gaon's custom of these special Shir Shel Yom for the holidays, etc., isn't exactly the practice that was in the temple for 2 reasons. We'll review. Because these songs don't match up with what they did in the temple, and they could not have, or they're unsourced. And Vilna Gaon limits 1 song per day, even though we have in the temple there was a Shachar song and a Mincha song, and the Musaf song is when they have make the decide between 1 song of a few potential ones possibly, and 1 song wins. So it doesn't really fit. So I was asking the rabbi about this, and you look in the sources for a number of these songs. It's in Sofrim 18, and there Rabbi Yochanan has the principle that actually people know about this principle. They heard it, and this comes up history-wise. And he says, "Shekol mazkir pasuk be'onatho ma'aleh alav." Whoever says a verse in its proper time, or like a section from the Tanakh in its proper time, that is, when it's relevant to that day. For example, people read from the books of the prophets what happened on the 24th of Kislev in history, so they read those verses on the 24th of Kislev, Erev Pesach, Erev Chanukah. Fine. It's as though, or they give him credit for, Ki'ilu bonem is be'ach chadash, he's built the altar anew, u'makriv alav korban, he's offered a sacrifice thereon. So the Vilna Gaon is basically saying, I might not know exactly what was done in the temple. The reason we're having these special songs is because they're relevant to the day. So I'm singing a song that has to do with Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Chodesh because it is as though I'm building an altar, rebuilding the altar, and offering a sacrifice thereon, even if this is not the exact song they sang in the temple. And this explains why, for example, the Vilna Gaon could come up with a song for Hanukkah and a song for Purim. We don't necessarily have any reason to believe that these songs were sung in the temple ever, in conjunction with the sacrifices, and certainly they did not take precedence over, let's say, the weekday sacrifice, the weekday song that accompanied the sacrifice in the temple. When it was Purim in the temple, yes, they read the Megillah, But they didn't say, well, it's Tuesday and it's Purim, so we're going to have the Purim song beat the Tuesday song. That's not what happened, or in conjunction with the Purim song. There was no Purim song in the temple. But we're going to do so because it fits the day. So too, the Hanukkah song. The Hanukkah song in the Psalms actually says this song is meant for the inauguration of the altar. So that's why we go about doing it. And so too with Barchi Nafshi. Barchi Nafshi is relevant to Rosh Chodesh, so we're achieving something by reciting it on Rosh Chodesh, even though it was not necessarily done there. Okay, so it's now we're talking about Rosh Chodesh. We're talking about the seventh parak. We'll go into what says, what do you do on Rosh Chodesh? There's a Musaf on Rosh Chodesh. So the Rambam has to make mention of this. It's a mitzvah to bring the Musaf. So the Rambam, aside from numbering the mitzvahs, he's going to tell us right here that on Rosh Chodesh, there's a specific commandment to offer more sacrifice. By the way, this Musaf was inherently different than all the other Musafim. In what way? All the other Musafim, they already knew to anticipate that day coming. So Shabbos, they knew to be ready to offer the Korban Musaf, since God created the universe. And with regards to Passover, so they know there's going to be a Musaf on the 15th of Nisan because the Sanhedrin 2 weeks ago announced that there was Rosh Chodesh. But actual Rosh Chodesh was often decided that day. The sages knew that yesterday was the 29th of the month. The only question is today going to be Rosh Chodesh? It's day 30 and the witnesses come and they're going to be examined, and it's pretty certain that they're able to see the moon, and apparently they did find it. So we're declaring Rosh Chodesh, or we're just going to let today pass by without being Rosh Chodesh, and tomorrow will by default be Rosh Chodesh. Either way, they didn't have it could have been on this day 30, and let's say on a normal day when there's Musaf, they start getting into the Musaf already right after doing the Korban Tamid. So the Kohanim, I guess, are finished with the Korban Tamid sometime around 8:30 or so in the morning. Okay, and now it's time for the Musaf, so they get cracking with the Musaf. But if it's Rosh Chodesh, they still have to put a hold on it until the Sanhedrin declares it. And it could be the Sanhedrin will declare it quite late in the day. And eventually, because of circumstances that cause confusion, it says that there was a takana. The Sanhedrin stopped taking witnesses by a certain point in the middle of the day to make it, to make the temple service run the right way. See that Gemara actually uses it. It confused the Levium. And that was wrong. They were singing the wrong song. Okay, so there was a limit to how long you could wait for this to happen. But the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh was inherently different than the other Musafin because it could have been delayed in the day. On new moons, Rosh Chodesh, that's when they bring the Musaf after the daily morning offering. The Chamo Musaf Rosh Chodesh, how much was, or how many animals was this? I mean, Kamo, he has to count the animals. How many animals on Rosh Chodesh? It says, Parim Shnaim Va'el Echad. 2 bulls, 1 ram, L'shivach Lasim, and 7 lambs. Hakol Olof, all of them were burnt offerings, total of 10 more burnt offerings. Us'ir Izim Hatav, and 1 he-goat as a sin offering. It's not a burnt offering, it's a sin offering. And because it's a sin offering, it was consumed by the Kohanim who were on duty that day.